Kia ora no tātou. Kei te mihi atu ki a koe te whanaunga no Ngāti Tūwhare toa. I tae mai nei i te rānei ki te whakanui te tēnei kaupapa mō Waitangi. Ka huri atu ki a koe te pāpa tuate. Kei te kōtaku ngākau i kiti atu i a koe i runga i tēnei whenua, i runga i te aroha o te kaupapa o te rā, i runga hoki i te tino pātai me pēhea te huarahi tōtika mō tātai te iwi Māori. Ka huri atu au ko hoki kia koutou o ngā puhi nui tonu, te tai tokerau. Hei manaaki tā tātou nei kāwanata tapu, mai te timatanga o tēnā kāwanata i tēnei rā. Kei te mihi miharo kia koutou, kei te mōho aha ko te piki me te heke, he tino kaupapa tērā mō tātou te iwi Māori, me te iwi Pākehā i tēnei whenua. Ka huri au nei ki te reo tuarua o tēnei whenua, engari i te kuia i te whaia, ka aua e pāpauri mai i rongo au i tō kōrero. Ko tō hia mā te reo Māori, te reo hei whakahaere ngā kaupapa katoa mō tēnei whenua. I'm a bit of an off-course substitute. I come with an apology. I know a lot of people had expected Moana Jackson to be here today, but Moana had a bit of a turn and couldn't make it on a flight, so I'm a bit of an off-course substitute, because one of the things he wants to talk to the forum today about, which I'm going to convey, is that this year is a significant year if we're looking at the Treaty of Waitangi as the constitutional foundation stone of the modern New Zealand state, because of course the New Zealand government has instituted a constitutional review which will look at a number of things, including the place of the treaty in the future constitutional arrangements of this country. Moana had been invited with Professor Margaret Mutu last Waitangi to undertake a process independent from the Crown, independent from John Key, independent from David Shearer, independent from Peter Sharples, to make sure that we as Māori have our say about our most sacred document. As I understand it, there have been almost 300 hui held around the motu by Moana and his team. They've been held in little meeting houses and dining rooms. They've been held by rangatahi Māori at wānanga. They've been held at kapahaka practices. They've been held at touch practices. And overwhelmingly, the kōrero from our people is that the treaty is a fundamental document in both the past and future of this nation. It's a fundamental document that sets out the relationship paradigm between Māori and non-Māori, but more importantly, how power should be retained and shared in the future of this country. His report is being collated as we speak, and he hopes to have, I think, the final few hui in the next 2 months, and a final report will be delivered to the Iwi Leaders Forum and hopefully delivered to a hui of the motu following thereafter. But what is really important today, because I think we lose sight of this in the media hype, is that here, a long time ago, there were a lot of people like us. It's estimated there was about 2,000 people here on that day, negotiating fundamental human rights, fundamental constitutional rights. And we come here today following that document eventually being developed, not just to protest, not just to celebrate Pākehatanga, but to remember those people who fought for our rights. Those people whose intellectual wisdom provided us with a covenant about peace. Fundamentally, it was about peace between us, Māori, tangata whenua, and those coming to our country, and how we would live together to promote peace amongst us. For me, as someone who's a treaty activist, I've been coming here for a number of reasons, but that's my first reason. Te Arawa didn't sign the treaty, but we did in 1890 give our word to the treaty. And if you go to Tamata Kapua in our meeting house, there's only one document other than a carving on our meeting house walls, and it is Te Tiriti o Waitangi. So why would a tribe who doesn't actually sign the treaty confirm that the treaty is a fundamental constitutional document in its House of Parliament? It's because the treaty is a far-seeking vision. It's a vision that talks about how we would retain power over those things that are important to us, but how we would share this country with Pākehā, with Chinese, with Pacific Island whānau, with all of those who have come as part of our nation, firstly to respect Papa Tiranuku herself, but more fundamentally to respect the right of us as tangata whenua to hold on to those important things. Now, we all know in the history of colonisation of this country that some of those important things got taken away. Our language got taken away. Our right to our lands got taken away. Within 50 years, over 70% of our land had been confiscated from us by acts of parliament that had been initiated without our consent. There had been wars declared against our people. There were invasions on many of our most precious territories, with the last invasion not being in the 1800s, as some will say, but I suggest when the troops of the Crown went into Maunga Pohatu and invaded Maunga Pohatu and shot and murdered one of his sons and raped the women that were at Maunga Pohatu and then rounded up Ruakenana and held him in jail unnecessarily for several months. Some say a further invasion of that kind occurred not in the too distant past at Rātoki. And I pay particular reverence at this moment to the two brothers who are in jail. One's at Rimutaka in the moment, and one's at Waikeria, Tameiti and Rangikaiwhiria Kemara, who as a result of the raids on Rātoki were found wrongfully, I think, guilty of crimes created by the state, and who have been languishing in prison for nearly 9 months waiting for their appeals to be heard. All these processes of colonisation have been ongoing. And they've been ongoing while we say as a nation that the treaty is our constitutional foundation stone, but we ignore as a nation the kinds of protections that should be put in place to ensure that those fundamental values that our old people talked about are available for our children. This Waitangi has been quite a different wairua than the last I've come. And I've been coming here for nearly 30 years, people. I first came with my uncle, Te Pere Curtis, whose first wife passed away this week. And my first trip here, and I was very young at that stage and I wasn't too sure what we were coming into, but it was a very taurawa kind of thing. We came early in the morning trying to catch the Ngāpuhis asleep. We ended up being treated like kings and queens when we were mihied into the wharea up there. And we didn't talk about the treaty, but we talked about the relationships between us and Ngāpuhi that had been cemented prior to the treaty and which the treaty had forged. After that first visit, though, there was this period of what I would call disruption, where, I don't know if you know, a lot of you young ones won't even know who a chap called Muldoon was. I suppose Prime Minister Muldoon is somebody that the old people might know, but these young kids don't even know who Piggy Muldoon was. But back in those days, he didn't like us activists, and we couldn't even get past Paihia in those days, people. We were kind of held up at the roundabout down Paihia. Most of us were arrested because Angeline sang too loud, okay? And put onto a bus and held in a bus for a little while. So that was kind of the disruptive period for the next 5 years. We all learned to be really good singers on the bus. We all learned to be hated by the half the nation, because the only photos you saw of us were with us in handcuffs going into the buses. I bet you many of you didn't know that most of us had economic degrees and legal degrees and everything else. All they'd say is that, geez, that girl, where does she come from? She's out of it, you know. This is the stuff that was going on for us. Then, of course, the treaty became the thing to do in the 1980s, and that was largely because of my heroes and heroines, and I want to mention a few today. The late Tom Te Maro, the great leader of the Kotahitanga movement, a Ngāti Porou orator who I don't think has been equalled at all in my generation. A man who brought up here every year the importance of us standing united as the united tribes and peoples of Aotearoa New Zealand to protect the things that we importantly hold. My next heroine was the late Eva Rickard.
Yeah.
Now, all of you know that finger from Eva. You got the finger, boy, you better watch out. That's worse than going to jail, okay? And she used to point her finger on this marae and every other marae at any Pākehā who dared to deny her the right to stand and to uphold the issues that are so important to her. And Eva taught me one thing, is that it's actually your own people that are the worst to you. It's not the Pākehā. It's when you're standing up to protests, it's your own people that want to hide you because they're embarrassed by the things that you say. But she always used to tell me, you have the courage of the convictions of your belief and the understanding of the historical rightness of what you say. And no matter what your people do to you, you stand with mana, and you stand proudly, and you hold steadfast to the treaty. I want to talk about another woman who is quite different to Eva. She was Miss New Zealand in her time, but she was also one of the greatest intellectual minds that I've ever had the privilege of meeting, and that's the late Dame Mira Sazi. She was one of the first presidents of the Māori Women's Welfare League, but she also took the treaty to the United Nations a long time ago with the Labour government, and she fought bravely in the United Nations for the human rights of women and children to be recognised in Indigenous covenants. She took the treaty from domestic law, actually from Nuri Whenua where she hails, right through all the courts of this land, and she took it to the United Nations to ensure that the treaty was given fortitude in that heart. Another man who I cannot actually go past is the late Sir James Henare. Sir James' understanding of treaty jurisprudence is greater than any Supreme Court judge or any other lawyer I've ever presented submissions with. His understanding was born from the wānanga of Ngāpuhi, but was also born from actually having to fight for treaty rights in a period when the assimilation of Māori and the fact that there was policy actively promoting us to be a dying race was things that he was working against. He was a great man, and he was a great person here at Waitangi every year that I would listen to hours for, telling us about the history of what was happening here at Taurangatira. The last person I want to talk about, and there are many, many that I've overlooked, like Wera Hauraki, is Maturata. Matu died as a pauper on the side of the road after we'd done a case for him in the Privy Council about fisheries rights. Matu was somebody who went out on his own, a bit like Hone Harawira did, when he felt that party politics was actually undermining Māori rights. Maturata put his neck on the line for unions, put his neck on the lines for those that were poor, ensured that the tenants of the Ratana church that he was actually grown up with weren't just lip service, but there was real housing policy for the poor, for widows, for those that were impoverished. Maturata didn't like it when people in the Labour Party tried to denigrate the treaty and privatise the assets, so he set up his own party of independence. And he linked all of the beginnings of his discussions to the sacred document that we've come here today to honour and to remember, and to remind those that would dishonour and forget that the constitutional future of this country is forged from that foundation stone. I want to go from that period of the 80s to what we've now come to in the 90s, and that's the corporatism of the treaty. How it's now becoming something bought and sold, so that the iwi leaders actually go and have a discussion about Te Treaty, not here at Taurangatira, but in some flash hotel down at Paihia, where most of us aren't invited to. And we hear on the television that they're talking about water rights, they're talking about money, they're talking about how they can make more money. We're hearing that they're talking about how you can do away with the tribe and create a corporate entity. All of those discussions aren't being held like this in an open way on the marae, but held behind closed doors for the benefit of Honeki and his friends and the odd brown politician that may get an invitation into that forum. Now that corporatism of the treaty is as dangerous as the invasion that I talked about in Maunga Pohatu. At least there the weapons were guns of mass destruction. You saw the bullets, you know they came with their soldiers and they came with the purpose of breaking down Māori authority. But the corporatism of the 1990s and more recent times is about the destruction of our values. And that's what our queer and our lady here just talked about. It's about substitution of mana for money. It's about telling people that you can manage your treaty rights by going into a corporate arrangement with Mr. Fletcher or Mr. Fontira or whoever is the latest Mr., because there's very few Mrs. in this corporate world, okay? They normally are Mr. somebody. And that you can get your extra pūtea coming from the shares of that Mr. But my problem is who's actually seen the trickle down from these corporate entities? How much money has actually flowed through to the marae? I actually go around a lot of our marae and I actually say, oh, I hear that Tainui's got 800 million. Have they done all the toilets up on all their maraes yet? Have they actually spent time making sure that all the kitchens in the maraes have the flash cooking facilities that everyone else has? Or have they just decided that they're going to give marae grants of about 50,000 a year, which we know isn't even enough to buy a new stove these days? You know, these are the questions that you have to start pondering. So we've gone into this corporatism or the corporatization of the treaty. And now I want to talk to the young ones. So that's meant the treaty doesn't mean much to you. So you become the generation, what I call the Cocacolonisation generation. You've been colonised by the Coca-Cola that you drink, by all of the t-shirts that you wear from Nike, you know about let's just do it, brothers, let's just do it. You know more about who plays for NBA than who actually signed the treaty. You know more about where you get your basketball boots from than you actually understand about the fact that your ancestor fought and died on a mountain to protect